Hi, and welcome to our audiobook series brought to you by Burgapoly Publishing. Let the journey begin. Today we are presenting
Chapter 3, The Adventure Begins. The waiting area beyond the gate was vast, filled with those stepping toward their next journey. Monitors flickered to life, a woman appearing on multiple screens, her voice calm and instructional as she guided them through the boarding process. When the doors finally opened, John flowed with the current of bodies moving toward the transport. He aimed for the back, instinctively seeking distance from the energy of the moment, from the noise of partings and beginnings. A voice, a presence that drifted into his space with the ease of familiarity, sidled up beside him. "Hi, John." John turned, his eyes meeting bright blonde hair in a confident stance. "Hi, Annalisa," he replied. "How's it going?" "I'm doing well," she said with the kind of certainty that made John wonder if she was ever uncertain about anything at all. They passed through the opening together. Inside, the transport was a cavernous metal behemoth, its interior resembling a massive airborne vessel. 4 seats lined each side, while the center row stretched 8 across. Spiral staircases curved elegantly at the front and back, leading passengers to an upper and lower level. Beverage stations stood beside them, already attracting a cluster of people. John followed her down the aisle. "Are you and Todd still seeing each other?" Annalisa's stride did not break. "Yeah, you could say that." She reached a row and gestured. "Hey, do you want to sit together?" John hesitated, his instincts flickering with caution. He glanced around, scanning the crowd. "Isn't Todd going off to school with us?" Annalisa shrugged, unconcerned. "He told me to meet him here, but I haven't seen him." Then, with the ease of someone who always knew where to look, she tilted her head. "Oh, there he is now." John turned, following her gaze, and the next moment unfolded before him. The booming voice came before the man himself, cutting through the low murmur of passengers settling into their seats. "Hey, John!" The words barely reached him before Todd barreled past, a force of nature. More than a person, nearly knocking him off balance as he muscled his way into the seat beside Annalisa. Todd didn't walk. He claimed space. "Thanks for saving me a seat there, buddy." Todd grinned, his presence all broad shoulders and self-assurance, filling the space as if the transport itself were his domain. Standing in the aisle like an afterthought, John hesitated, watching as Annalisa and Todd instinctively turned away from him, their exclusion so effortless that it almost felt rehearsed. A beat of silence. John exhaled, stepping back from the unspoken barrier. "Okay, well, I'll catch up with you later." An automatic response, an escape disguised as departure. Annalisa barely glanced back over her shoulder. "See ya, John," she called, her tone light, dismissive. Behind her, Todd's voice carried, not bothering with subtlety. "What are you talking to that dork for?" John kept walking. He didn't hear her answer. Maybe there wasn't one. He moved further down the aisle, distancing himself from the shallow remnants of something that once mattered. His hands tightened into fists, then loosened again. Why had he even stopped to say hello? At last, an empty row, far enough back to disappear. John sank into the seat, turning toward the window. Outside, the world moved in patterns of order, unaffected by the trivial weight of human moments. He focused on the sight of docking crews making their final checks, losing himself in the mechanics of departure. A presence. From the corner of his vision, someone lingered in the aisle. He turned. Chi. She rocked lightly on the balls of her feet, hands clasped behind her back. That expression, half amusement, half exaggerated pity, crafted with just the right amount of mischief. "Mind if I sit with you?" she asked, stretching the question into a drawn-out plea, her face arranged into an overly dramatic sad puppy look. John let out a breath that was almost a laugh. She always knew how to break the tension. "Sure," he said, offering a half smile, motioning toward the seat beside him. She plopped down unceremoniously, exhaling as if she'd just escaped something far worse. "Wow," she murmured, shaking her head. "I can't believe I'm actually leaving home like this." "Yeah," John muttered, eyes flicking back to the window. "Me neither." Chi fidgeted with her fingers, which she only did when thinking too much. "I saw Todd and, Annalisa sitting up front." John didn't react. "That's okay. I saw her too." I didn't mean to bring her up, she added quickly, exaggerating a frown as if her regret needed physical manifestation. John turned to her, his smirk a little more substantial this time. Don't worry about it. I've completely forgotten about those wasted 6 months of my life. He leaned back into his seat. I mean, dating is kind of overrated anyway. She nodded, but there was a flicker of something behind her eyes. Something unreadable. Yeah, I guess so. John shrugged, voice light. Who would want to be tied down? Look at how much fun you, me, Tom, William, and Kyle have. If I were still dating Annalisa, I'm pretty sure she wouldn't let me hang out with you guys. He glanced around, scanning for the rest of their friends. The shuttle was filling up. The future was narrowing to a singular moment of acceleration. And somewhere in the background, Chi watched him, silent, thoughtful. Chi was quiet for a moment, her gaze shifting as if turning something over in her mind, examining it from every angle, before speaking it into existence. If you and I were dating, she said finally, her voice carefully measured, I would never be that way. John turned his head toward her, a short chuckle escaping before he could think too hard about the weight of the words. No, I guess you probably wouldn't. His grin was easy, natural, but something flickered in his expression, something thoughtful. But you might, he added, smirking. Chi raised an eyebrow, waiting. John shrugged, leaning back into the seat. The words that followed came easily, but they had a strange finality. Besides, we're best friends, he said. So we don't need to date. Being best friends is better than dating. That's my point. Chi's brow furrowed, the words sitting strangely in her mind. There was something about the way he said it. Final, like a closed door. Okay, she murmured. I guess you're right. But her voice lacked conviction. John stretched, running a hand through his dark hair, pushing it back from his face. A nervous habit, a tell. Well, when you hang around with friends, you have fun and then go home. When you date, you spend all your time together and eventually you get on each other's nerves. He scrunched his nose at the thought, shaking his head. It's inevitable. Chi let his words settle, considering them not just for their meaning, but for why he was saying them in the first place. Finally, she exhaled, slow and thoughtful. I guess that's one way to look at it. And yet some part of her wasn't sure she agreed at all. Passengers continued filing onto the transport, each step an unspoken transition from the familiar to the unknown. The air carried the quiet hum of uncertainty, blending with the mechanical precision of the boarding process. Overhead, soft chimes signaled as doors sealed shut, enclosing them within the metal womb of interstellar travel. Though the shuttle remained only 3/4 full, the schedule brooked no delay. A synthesized voice resonated through the cabin, an authoritative presence without substance. Attention, passengers, please familiarize yourselves with safety procedures. Secure harnesses and prepare for departure. Beside John, the sound of metal clanking drew his attention. Chi wrestled with the seat harness, her brow furrowed in frustration. I can't seem to get this to buckle, she admitted, irritation creeping into her voice. John leaned over, fingers deftly maneuvering the stubborn clasp. Here, just push it like this. A firm click rewarded his effort. Chi exhaled and looked up at him, her lips curling into a grateful grin. Thanks. He nodded, turning his gaze back toward the view beyond the window as the engines stirred. The transport lifted with measured grace, severing its tether to the planet below. Beneath them, the intricate streams of aerial vehicles wove a lattice of movement between skyscrapers, an orderly chaos dissolving into insignificance as the shuttle ascended. The cityscape diminished, the sky deepened. The transport tipped back as the vessel adjusted its trajectory, surrendering to the physics of escape velocity. The cabins shuddered slightly, the force pressing them deeper into their seats. Within moments, the blue of Zemia's atmosphere surrendered to the infinite black beyond. Chi, wide-eyed, pressed closer to the window. Wow, this is really cool. John, equally transfixed, could only nod. Yeah. Chi chuckled, a note of realization in her tone. You've never been in space before, have you? No, he admitted, still absorbing the weight of the moment. Never. A slight unease flickered across Chi's expression. I've got butterflies in my stomach. They said you might feel a little weightless before the internal gravity activates. John reached into his pocket, producing his earbuds. He let them go, watching as they floated briefly before falling unceremoniously to the floor. Well, they were floating. A soft chime accompanied the following announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, internal gravity has been activated. You are now free to move about the ship for the next hour until we reach our destination. From recessed compartments, racks slid open, revealing refreshments along the walls. The murmurs of passengers shifted into casual conversation, some rising to explore, others leaning into the novelty of space travel. Chi and John sat in silence for a while, content to observe the vast nothingness beyond the hull. John pointed toward a distant speck on the lunar surface. Look, you can see the dome of Moonbase 1. Chi leaned closer, her face nearly pressing against the glass. Oh yeah, I see it. She turned her head slightly, catching his gaze. The proximity stirred something unfamiliar, an awareness of space, of breath, of the almost imperceptible scent of mint lingering between them. John shifted slightly. Would you like to sit here? You'd get a better view. Chi tilted her head. Where would you sit? I'll take your seat, he answered quickly. She considered, then smirked. This seat is big enough for both of us. John hesitated before nodding. Well, okay. She scooted closer, making room as John adjusted beside her. They leaned in unison, faces parallel, eyes locked on the celestial expanse before them. The silence stretched, comfortable, unforced. This is kind of tight, John noted, shifting slightly. Chi turned with an amused glint in her eye. Why don't you just let me sit on your lap? John swallowed. Well, okay. She stood briefly, allowing him to settle before sitting lightly against him. His arms instinctively encircled her waist for balance, and together they stared out at the approaching moon, the enormity of space dwarfing whatever hesitation had existed between them. A hand clamped onto his shoulder. Well, isn't this cozy? Both John and Chi turned to see Tom grinning down at them from the row behind. Hey, Tom, they responded in unison. Tom stepped around, removing a small bag from Chi's previous seat before plopping down beside them. No matter how many times you see it, space is still something else. He leaned in, his presence radiating the same restless energy as always. Hey, long time no see, John. John narrowed his eyes slightly. Yeah. How many times have you been up here? Chi asked. Oh, 4 or 5 times, Tom said, already rummaging through his bag. He pulled out a packet of chips, tearing it open with the efficiency of someone who had long since abandoned etiquette. Want some? No thanks, they both replied in unison. Tom crunched noisily, oblivious to their lack of enthusiasm. If you think this is cool, wait till you see the other side. Our transport ship is massive. John scanned the passengers around them. Have you seen Kyle or William? Tom shook his head, swallowing his bite. Nope. John frowned. That's weird. They were supposed to be here. Maybe they're just running late, Chi suggested. Yeah, maybe, John murmured, though a nagging concern took root in his thoughts. Tom shrugged. I walked around earlier. Didn't see them anywhere. The atmosphere shifted subtly, the easy levity giving way to an unspoken question. John gazed back out the window, his thoughts drifting beyond the stars, beyond the immediate moment, towards something distant, something waiting, something unseen.
That wraps up Chapter 3 of Into the 6th Millennium, The Invasion of Zephro. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Grab the book and merch below and check out the tools we use to bring this story to life.